Pilot, and welcome to a quick tutorial on how to use the basic Codex details. When you first come into the screen, you will notice that your pilot name will be preloaded, and this is something that you can't change, and it's associated with your engine username. The next three items, or the three item areas, are to do with your primary, secondary and tertiary roles, if you have any preferences. You may not necessarily have them, but should you have them, you would be able to identify them, or as many as you actually have, in terms of what your piloting preferencing styles are. For the roles, we obviously have a number of roles that we define within the unit, which is helpful to kind of understand different mech piloting purposes. Over on the right hand side here, you'll see a quick summary of the various roles, just as a quick guide, but in the forum there are actually some better explanations and more detailed explanations about what the actual roles mean. So the primary, secondary and tertiary then obviously say your first, second and third choices in terms of roles, and then if you have any particular mech, should you want to actually try and identify them, you can do. You can either just put the name, or alternatively you can put the mech code or the variant that you actually like to apply there. Again, these are optional elements, you don't have to include them, or you don't necessarily have to have preferential choices, but if you do identify with these, then it can be useful to us in terms of, say, trying to understand any information related to pilot preferences. The next big area then is a kind of weekly timetable in terms of, say, trying to identify when you may be available, and obviously it's positively recording. Everything is set to no in terms of, say, you're not available, and it could be used in the future to try and understand social information about when people are obviously slightly more readily able to do things, if you know what I mean. So as you can see here, I've yet to actually fill in anything in terms of, say, useful social information on my particular pilot codex data. So I'm going to say for Monday or whatever that I'd normally be available from 6 o'clock till 12 o'clock in the evening, sort of thing, as say that's when I would regularly play on a Monday night. You can notice that all the times are essentially GMT, or using UTC code, as to what these particular hours actually all indicate. So you would need to convert your particular timescale into a GMT time frame. Over on the right hand side here, you'll notice that there is both your local time, which for me is in British summertime, or GMT +1 at the moment, and then we have a useful world clock which allows us to actually sort of compare times against one another. So to be able to obviously get GMT, you would just obviously apply the appropriate timeline to actually find where GMT exists, and then compare that against your equivalent time to be able to obviously sort of backtrack and find out what the hour difference is, whatever, to GMT or UTC. The number of available days is then just a quick summary in terms of, say, if you are socially available at any particular time during a specific day, then obviously that makes you available for that individual day. So it's a quick way of identifying the number of days without actually having to go through a whole analysis of when you are available, or when you've indicate your availability. So therefore it's a very useful quick stat just to actually compare in terms of, say, pilots' availability, the number of actual days they actually have some availability for. So just to quickly show you, or add some social interest for myself for a Monday, if I go to 6 o'clock, and I can change these flags all to Y to say that I would be socially available, or recognise myself as being socially available for the unit at that time. Again, I can go on to add further yes and no ticks based on my own social preferences as when I'm going to be available for the other days as needs be. So I can now say, well, I've identified Monday as being socially available, so I've obviously one day that I'm now applied. The next thing is the actual group that you're associated with. These at the moment are obviously just either non-apprentice, assassin or executive based on the groups that you see on the roster. And again, it's just a quick way of linking your particular stats through to the actual group that you're actually represented to. As the unit grows, there'll be more groups here, whatever, as identified, as we need those for whatever organised purposes. So you expect to come back and be able to change your group regularly, etc. If you've actually moved from one group to another. And obviously you need to ensure that you're applying the correct one, and ensuring that you're not trying to misrepresent yourself at the same time. The the next indicator is whether or not you consider yourself available for a gang, which is whether or not you actually consider yourself available for 12-man or more organised play. So in this particular case, I've set the fact that I am available for gangs. You could still potentially have the option to play in 12-mans and everything else, but this is whether or not you'd actually want to try and associate yourself with the idea of structured 12-man play. And then finally at the bottom we just have any general comments that you want to say about social data. So I can now put in something like times vary dependent on needs. So that's just a specific comment that I can say about myself, etc., which just might be useful. So once I've entered all the information as relevant about my own particular Codex information, I can then just click the grey button at the bottom, and that will then record all of those details ready for use, and or record them as needs be. And that is a quick introduction to the pilot Codex details.